All right, welcome. Today we're doing a really deep dive, almost like a forensic analysis of one of the most incredible statements in the entire Qur'an. And get this, it was spoken by the most unlikely person you can imagine. We're going to zero in on just one verse, Surah Maryam, verse 30, and really unpack all its layers. We're talking about what it means to be a servant of God, different spiritual states, and even the very nature of what it means to be certain in your faith.
So here it is. This is the verse that's at the very heart of our entire discussion today. And what makes this so absolutely staggering is the context. I mean, think about it. These are the very first words the Quran says the infant Jesus spoke, from his cradle. He's speaking to defend his mother Mary. And in this one moment, he delivers this complete theological statement, a mission, and a definition of who he is. It's all right there, in one single miraculous breath.
Okay, so to really do this verse justice, we've got to break it down piece by piece. First, we'll look at that core declaration of being a servant. Then, we'll unpack this idea of blessedness. What does Mubarak really mean? After that, we'll get into the pillars of prayer and charity, and then we dive into the really philosophical stuff, how to confront doubt. And we'll wrap up by exploring what it means to strengthen your inner self and the real goal of getting closer to God. All right, let's start at the very beginning. The first phrase, قَالَ إِنِّي عَبْدُ اللَّهِ. He said, "Indeed, I am the servant of Allah." The choice of words here, it is so important. This is the very first thing he says to identify himself to the world.
Now, did you catch the order of things here? The term he uses is Abd Allah, the servant of Allah. And he says this before he even mentions being a prophet. That's huge, because in this spiritual framework, the highest possible station you can reach isn't being a king. It's not even being a prophet. It's achieving perfect servitude. You know, this title is used again and again in the Quran for its most honored prophets, Muhammad, Moses, David, you name it. It really drives home the point that being a servant is the absolute pinnacle. It's a title of supreme honor. It means your entire being is just in willing, complete submission to God. Everything else, all the other titles, are built right on top of that foundation.
Okay, so let's move on to the next key phrase in the verse, وَجَعَلَنِي مُبَارَكًا, which means, and he has made me blessed. Now the word Mubarak usually just gets translated as blessed, right? But if we look a little closer at how it's used right here, we find a really profound difference.
And this slide just lays it out so clearly. On the one hand, you have the prophet Abraham's prayer. He is asking God to make him blessed. See, it's something he's hoping to achieve, a goal he's working towards. But then you look at Jesus' declaration. It's totally different. He's stating it as a fact. It's a quality he already has. It's not something he's looking for. It's just part of who he is, fundamentally. This points to a really unique, built-in kind of blessedness, given by God, that's just a core part of his very being.
So, right after declaring who he is and this blessed state he's in, the verse just pivots immediately to the divine commands, the active duties, the things you do that define a life of service. And what are they? Prayer and charity.
And you've got to pay attention to the specific language used here. The word wasani doesn't just mean he suggested. No, this is a divine binding command. It's a serious charge. And the charge involves two main pillars, as-salat, which is that continuous, moment-to-moment connection with God, and az-zakat, which is the duty you have to your community, purifying your wealth by giving. And then look at the time frame he gives, ma dumtu hayyan, as long as I am alive. This isn't a temporary thing. It's unconditional. It's perpetual. It's just woven into the fabric of his life, from the very first breath to the last.
All right, so we've talked about the outward stuff, the declarations, the duties. Now we're going to shift and look inward, at the internal state you need to actually sustain all of that. And this part of the analysis brings up a really deep point about the single greatest spiritual challenge that we all face.
So let me ask you this. What do you think is the real enemy of faith? Like, what's its true opposite? What's the biggest thing that gets in the way of belief?
Well, according to this analysis, it's not what you might think. The true enemy isn't straight-up disbelief or just rejecting faith. It's doubt. The Arabic word is shak. It's that feeling of being stuck, that state of confusion that just paralyzes you and stops you from moving forward with any real conviction.
But, and this is a really important point, the source says not all doubt is bad. There's a methodical doubt, which is actually a good thing. Think of it like a scientist or a detective. They use doubt as a tool to ask questions and get to the truth. That's totally different from debilitating doubt, which is just being lost in confusion with no direction. So the point isn't to never have questions. The real goal is to get to yaqeen, which is certainty. And certainty isn't the absence of questions, it's what you get after you've honestly faced them and found the answers.
In this framework, the Quran itself is seen as the tool that gives you the arguments you need to turn that healthy, methodical doubt into deep, unshakable certainty.
Now, making that journey from doubt to certainty, well, that takes a ton of inner strength. And that brings us to our next idea, the prophetic self and what it really means to have a strengthened kingdom.
So the source text points to this phrase, fashadana mulka, which translates to, so we strengthened his kingdom. But it argues that when we're talking about a prophet, this kingdom isn't what you'd think. It's not about land or armies or political power. The real kingdom that has to be conquered and made strong is the one inside.
And this leads us straight to this really crucial concept of the nafs. You can translate it as the self or the ego or the soul. Basically, it's that inner world of all your desires, your impulses, your thoughts. In Islamic theology, there's this idea that the nafs has different stages, from the part of you that pushes you towards bad things, to the part that feels guilt and reproaches itself, and finally to the soul that's completely at peace. The greatest spiritual struggle, sometimes called the jihad al-nafs, is all about mastering this inner kingdom. You have to purify it, control it, and lift it up to that final peaceful state. When you achieve that inner strength, that's when you can truly be in alignment with God. It's all about mastering yourself as the true foundation for any kind of spiritual authority.
Okay, for our final section, let's look at the ultimate purpose behind big religious rituals. And we're going to focus on the act of sacrifice. What's the real point? I mean, what's the philosophical goal of doing something like that?
Well, the analysis breaks it down into a three-step journey. Step 1 is qurbani. That's the physical act of sacrifice itself, the outward offering that people can see. But you can't stop there. Step 2 is moving beyond the physical act, understanding that it means nothing without the right intention behind it. And that leads to the final, ultimate goal, which is Step 3, qurb. This means achieving spiritual proximity, a real closeness to God. So you see, the physical action is just the car you drive to get to this incredible spiritual destination.
And this quote just nails it perfectly. The essence of qurbani is qurb. The whole purpose is literally hidden inside the word itself. The entire point of the ritual of sacrifice is to achieve the state of closeness. The outward action is just a symbol for a deep inward change.
So that brings us full circle, right back to where we started, with this one incredibly powerful verse from Surah Maryam. And it leaves us with a pretty mind-blowing question, doesn't it? How can a single statement from an infant in a cradle hold an entire, sophisticated blueprint for a spiritual life? I mean, it lays out the foundation of servitude, it defines what it means to be blessed, it sets up lifelong duties, it gives a game plan for dealing with doubt, and it points us to the ultimate goal of getting closer to God. The fact that a whole spiritual framework is compressed into one miraculous sentence is something theologians often point to as an example of the Qur'an's ijaz, its inimitability. It's seen as a testament to the sheer depth of the text and a sign of its divine source.